Interest has not waned despite the uncertain times that we live in. In fact, I'd almost make the argument that there's an even greater enthusiasm for investors to invest behind sustainability themes. In Asia, if we look at the green arena, there has been a proliferation of issuances, and they vary depending on the country. But if I were to sort of maybe bucket the use of proceeds, the vast majority in the Asia region are going to the green real estate sector, going to energy efficiency topics, and going to transportation, particularly transportation infrastructure as vehicle electrification becomes more a reality. And then I think if we look at some of the South Asia countries, water is becoming an increasing topic, water scarcity and dealing with the effects of water living in daily life in sinking cities and so on. So all of these themes are very much on the minds of both the Asian issuers and the investors.
Marisa, I'm also curious to find out from you about what could happen next year, because Asia's green bond and loan market has really been flourishing and issuance has been outstanding, and it does seem like investors are more keen to go green now. But is any of this having a material impact on climate change? Is this having a material impact on the Sustainable Development Goals, for example? I think issuance is easy to measure, but real-world impact is much harder to measure. What's your take?
Well, in order for the world to mitigate and address climate change, there has to be hundreds of billions of dollars invested in innovation, so solutions that can address climate change. But it's not all about innovation. We also need investment in process improvement, in business model evolution, and so on. And as climate change marches on, despite the fact that we had sort of the global pause here with most of the world in lockdown, and we've seen, a break in CO2 emissions, the reality is that 2020 is poised to be the hottest year on record, and the effects of climate change continue to hit us. And as a result, I think the enthusiasm from the investment community, the regulatory side of the equation, which underpins a lot of the regulation that will come and support the growth in the market and the investments in the market, all of that continues. And then you also have the court of public opinion, which wants to see climate change addressed. So I don't see a relaxation or a cessation of the enthusiasm for the topic. And the other thing that I think is very important is in sustainable strategies through the crisis, whether we are talking about the depth of the crisis when the markets had traded off significantly, say in the late March, early April timeframe, or in the modest recovery when we've seen the markets rebound, sustainable strategies, ESG funds, have materially outperformed their traditional benchmarks. And that holds through across funds that are thematic in industries, as well as broader ESG strategies. And that performance has also given enthusiasm to investors that there isn't a trade-off between investing in green or sustainable strategies and returns.
Do you think that that is primarily why interest has not waned?
I think that's a big piece of the equation. So, as I say, I think there are market fundamentals underpinning the market, again, whether it's regulatory intervention, whether it is investors who give asset managers money, asking them if they are investing their capital in a sustainable way. Those are all also factors. But performance is key. If you're an institutional investor, your job is to meet or beat market. And when you can demonstrate to your stakeholders that you can do that, then, of course, that just fuels the machine.
How much of a priority is ESG for corporates specifically right now, of course, dealing with the COVID challenges, looking to have to cut costs and the like?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So one of the questions that I think the market was asking is, in the midst of the pandemic, if we isolate the E, the S, and the G, will the E be drowned out by S? And it is true that there is a natural response, whether you are a corporate or an individual, that you want to do something to help address the suffering that has been caused by the COVID pandemic. And there has been a proliferation of COVID-related issuances in the market where the use of proceeds is very much targeted at pandemic relief. And I think that's an interesting theme. But what we also see is there's I think, a global awakening that you can't separate the environment from social issues. Clearly, if you look at the most polluted areas of the world and you have high particulate in the air, as an example, that clearly is going to affect those who are afflicted by a respiratory disease. So you can't separate the E and the S. And therefore, I think what we see from the investment community is a desire to invest in both. And some of the issuances that have come through the pandemic have targeted both environmental and social issues at the same time in their use of proceeds.